Nothing. Anything that happens to us, we will come out with the sum total of good more than any harm and suffering that came to us. And this is again very, very explicit in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that of the wisdoms of this type of suffering is to reconnect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah mentions the Quraysh in the Quran every time they're about to drown, they're about to be killed, whatnot. دَعَوُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They make dua to Allah sincerely to Him. Allah never criticizes that they turn to Allah at times of sincerity, at times of distress. What does Allah criticize? Once the calamity is lifted, they forget. So brothers and sisters, don't feel guilty, don't feel bad that you find yourself becoming more religious in these times of difficulty. Quite the contrary, this is the primary goal of difficulty. In fact, Allah mentions this in Surah Al-Ahzab, when it came to the Khandaq, the battle of the Khandaq, right? Allah mentions this in the Quran, that when the terror increased, and people said to the Muslims, aren't you scared? Aren't you terrified? Allah said what? فَزَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. The battle of Ahzab, the battle of the trench, if you remember your seerah, less than 3,000 Sahaba had to face more than 10,000 of the Confederates. 10,000. And the Confederates were better armed and had more horses and had more weapons, and the Muslims were not only surrounded, their supplies began to diminish and hunger became rampant. They didn't even have animals to eat. Remember the story of the miracle of a little bit of meat being fed to the entire army. And at that point in time, the munafiqun said, Khalas, give up. All avenues are cut off. Can't you see? Inna nasa qad jama'u lakum. All of mankind has gathered to kill you. So be scared, be terrified. At that point in time, what happened? They turned to Allah. Can you imagine the amount of iman they had as they turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Can you imagine that ikhlas that you'll have when you realize there is no hope other than Him, and there is no way out other than His way? That ikhlas is the primary goal of that fear and pain and suffering. To reconnect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course Allah is very explicit about this as well in a number of other incidents in the battle of, a number of battles are mentioned. I have to move on to the next point. So we're talking about some of the wisdoms of why calamities are happening. Of the wisdoms of calamities, brothers and sisters, of the wisdoms of why we have these pains and suffering, of why the ummah is going through these issues, is Allah Azza wa Jal explicitly mentions. Alif Lam Mim. أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَنْ يُتْرَكُوا أَنْ يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Did mankind think that we would let them be simply by saying we believe and without testing them? وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. We tested the people before them so that we will see who is truthful and who is lying. And what this tells us is very simple. This world is called in our text Darul Bala. This is the abode of testing. When we hear of these tests, of these massacres, when we hear of the pain and suffering, when we see the rise of Islamophobia, we need to understand that this is a test from Allah. It is a test that is meant to sift the good from the bad. And Allah says very explicitly, لِيَمِيزَ اللَّهُ الْخَبِيثَ مِنَ الطَّيِّبِ, so that Allah can sift the pure from the impure. And Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions the word, وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. We tested with fitna those before. And it's a very beautiful word, fitna. It's a very powerful word. Arabic, as we all know, is the most eloquent language in all of human civilization. How can it not be when Allah revealed the Quran in Arabic? The word fatana, the word fitna, is actually a very interesting word. In pre-Islamic Arabic, the goldsmith was called the one who causes fitna. So you call the goldsmith fattan. That's the name of a goldsmith. Fattan. You know what a goldsmith does? A goldsmith takes raw gold and he puts it through a furnace, a fire. He puts it through a number of processes. The most important is a burning hot fire. what comes out at the end is pure gold. So from raw gold, which is mixed with impurities, it's mixed with sand, it's mixed with things that is not gold, the fattan causes fitna. And so from raw gold, at the end of fitna, what happens? You get pure gold. This is the Arabic word for fitna. So when the calamity is coming, realize you are raw gold. You and I are raw gold. And the purpose of the fitna is to purify us. Because what does raw gold do? What does raw gold contain? Impurities, correct? What does raw gold contain? Sand and other minerals that you don't want and other elements you don't want. So after the fitna, you discard all of these negativities and you come out with pure gold. This is what fitna is. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using in the Quran. Of the wisdoms of trials and suffering, is that it is through trial, and especially political trial, especially fitnas that are global or involving an entire society, that the Muslim unity is best materialized. Sometimes our unity is very, very weak and flimsy. Sometimes the ummah kind of sort of is very disunited. And an external prodding, an external fitna causes us to wake up and say, whoa, this is not, we have to combine, we have to fight together, we have to unify together, we cannot be divided or else we will fail. And we see this exact sentiment in the Battle of Badr, and we contrast it with the Battle of Uhud. In the Battle of Badr, what happened? In the Battle of Badr, the Ansar, if you remember a little bit of Seerah, the Ansar, they had signed up to defend the Prophet ﷺ, but not to attack on his behalf. That was the treaty, right? That was the covenant, Aqaba. In Aqaba, they signed up that they're going to defend, but there was no mention of attack. And the Battle of Badr was an attack because it's outside Medina. And it's for the caravan. They could have just come back and they said, oh, they're not attacking Medina. It's not our fault. It's not our problem. And the Prophet ﷺ asked the question, what do you think, Sahaba, what should we do? Should we attack or should we sit here or go back? And then Abu Bakr stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, we will fight on your behalf. Go and fight and we're going to be behind you. And the Prophet ﷺ thanked him, said, thank you, Jazakallah khair. Who's next? What do you say? He asked the question again. So then everybody is quiet. What Abu Bakr gave an opinion. What do we say? Umar stood up, said the exact same thing. And the Prophet ﷺ thanked him and he sat down. He asked the question again. A third muhajir stood up and said the same thing. Said, we are behind you, Ya Rasulullah. Thanked him and he sat down again. Then the Ansar figured out, oh, he's asking the question to see what we are going to say. And that's when the greatest of them stood up. Who remembers the name? Who was the name? Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. The one whom Allah's throne shook for when he died. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. When he died, Allah's throne shook, according to Hadith al-Bukhari. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh stood up and he says, perhaps you mean us, Ya Rasulullah. And the Prophet was silent, and his silence was his tacit approval. Our Prophet, when he was silent, that meant his approval. He was silent. Perhaps you mean us, Ya Rasulullah. And the point is, are you going to unify or not? Or are you going to break away? Are you going to stick with the jama'ah? Because technically, legally, the Ansar could have said, Ya Rasulullah, we didn't sign up for this. They could have said it, because the contract of Aqaba that they agreed to was to defend when Medina is attacked. To defend you like we defend our women and children. But Badr and Medina is not being attacked. Badr is an offensive to attack the Quraysh, and now the Quraysh are protecting the caravan, so now this is a caravan. So are you going to unify, or are you going to sit and break away? So when the external threat came, what did the Ummah do? They unified. That's how the Sahaba. So in Badr, Allah revealed, وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ وَاصْبِرُوا. Don't differ amongst one another. Because if you do that, you will fail and your impetus, your courage will be lost. So they did not break up. They were united. So Allah saved them. In Uhud, when they disunited, what did Allah say? حَتَّى إِذَا فَشِلْتُمْ وَتَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So notice in Badr Allah says, you didn't break up, you didn't disunify, so I blessed you. And in Uhud Allah says, when you broke up and when you disagreed, then your himmah, your courage was lost, and what happened? Now, the question is very simple. In light of all of that is happening in the ummah, are we going to understand the importance of Muslim unity? And this is a very deep topic that needs to be discussed at a higher level. What does Muslim unity mean? How can we attain unity through different groups and different firaq and different understandings of Islam? And there's no question this is a more advanced topic, but it is a topic that needs to be discussed at an academic level. And your ulama and your mashayikh have to be at the forefront of this topic. What does it mean to achieve unity given our differences? To what level of unity can be achieved? And I don't wish to say much more on this topic. I have many lectures on YouTube where I go into a lot of detail. And I have my positions that are very, very clear. And it is that anybody who respects the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ and wants to follow the sunnah, and anybody who respects the Sahaba, these people, all of them, they should have a strong sense of unity together. Despite other differences that might occur, if you want to follow the sunnah, you want to worship Allah based on the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, and you respect the Sahaba of the Messenger of Allah, then all of these trends, they need to at least set aside their differences for the greater good, for the greater good of Islamophobia, for the greater good of your political enemies, for the greater good. There has to be more unity. And for the other groups that don't have these conditions, then perhaps on some occasions there might be some type of coming together, and on other occasions we will agree to disagree. But the point is we need to be frank about these types of talks, and I leave the responsibility to your own ulama to take you further, because these are controversial issues. But the point is that in light of the strife and political fitnas, we need to put unity on the table and discuss it in practical terms. Of the benefits as well that come from this political strife is that one of the things that we see, and we see this from the seerah as well, that when the hatred of the enemies of Islam increases, it actually leads to interest in our faith and conversion to our faith. SubhanAllah, their hatred will work against them. And we have seen this in America. We have seen this across the European world. There was a famous case of a person who wanted to harm another Muslim in America, wanted to in fact, say some nasty and mean things, but it ended up that this person converted to Islam. There's a YouTube video about his whole story, how that happened. And if you look at the seerah, look at the conversion of Umar ibn Khattab. You all remember how Umar ibn Khattab converted, right? He was full of anger against his sister, remember? Remember, his sister converted, Fatima bint al-Khattab, and in his anger he marched to her house, and her husband Zayd were, as you know, reading the Quran, and he marched in, Sa'id ibn al-As, sorry, her husband was Sa'id ibn al-As, and her husband reading the Quran, and he marched in, and they denied, we're not Muslims, you're mistaken, but he knew they were Muslim, and he ended up hitting his own sister. In his rage and anger, he beat his own sister, the blood is pouring from her face. What happened? He woke out of his hatred. How can this be? This is not correct. The same goes for Hamza, by the way. How did Hamza radiallahu anhu convert? It was the excessive hatred of Abu Jahl. The excessive hatred of Abu Jahl one day was very nasty to the Prophet in public. Very mean. Above and beyond what is decent and normal. And when Hamza heard, he lost his mind in the sense like, how could you dare do this? And he uttered a phrase, and that phrase was, and I too am a Muslim. And he didn't actually convert up until that point in time. Yani in his defense, he said something that he didn't mean, but when he said it, then he lived up to it, and he became the best of the best. And the story is well known in the seerah, and I mention it as well in my seerah. But the point being, what we see is that this type of hatred, we invited a person to our masjid, who was one of the guards at Guantanamo, and this guard, his name is Terry. And Terry converted to Islam Why and how? He told us his story, and his story is well known. Brother Muazzam has written a whole book, and he's mentioned the story as well. Terry said that I was seeing how we're torturing these people. I was seeing we're depriving them of all of this, decency and whatnot. And I knew they weren't guilty. I know they're not interacting with them. And yet, he said, I felt more lonely and more sad than the prisoners that I was guarding and protecting. And I felt an emptiness, and I could see that they had more fulfillment in their lives than my emptiness. And I wondered, what could they possibly have that our torture to them is making them happier than the ones who are torturing them? And that's when he read the Quran. I think Brother Muazzam gave him the Quran, and others gave him the Quran, and gave him da'wah, and he converted to Islam, and now he is going around America giving da'wah to Islam. SubhanAllah. Think about this. Excessive hatred leads reasonable-minded people to do what? To do their research. And this is exactly what we're seeing over here. The next benefit, if they don't convert, is the next benefit. Even if people don't convert, many people stand up to defend the rights of freedom and justice, even if they don't convert to Islam. In other words, evil provokes good from other people, even if the type of good they do isn't the full conversion. I'm coming from America, and 2 weeks ago, there were mass protests across the country, because of the travel ban that the president has enacted. And I participated in the protest in Dallas, and we organized, and I spoke at the protest in my city, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. And we have never seen anything like this in the history of America. Over 90 protests at airports across the country. Tens of thousands of people. Wallahi, it's surreal. I cannot even describe to you. Walking into Dallas Airport, which is one of the largest airports in America, and I could not find space to walk in. I have to maneuver through the crowd to get to the front to meet the organizers and whatnot. Everybody is standing, chanting, no more Muslim ban, no more Muslim ban. We are one nation. We're going to not allow this to happen. So many chants. Jews, Christians, atheists, all of them standing together and saying this is discrimination. And when we prayed, and then a few days later, I gave a lecture in the Memphis one. In the Memphis March, Memphis is a historic city in America. There are many things it's famous for. One of the things it's famous for, Memphis is a city where Martin Luther King, the famous civil rights leader, was assassinated. This is where he was assassinated. And the place he was assassinated was a hotel. That hotel remains as it is, with the balcony still there, with the car that he was using. All of it is preserved there. And the hotel has been made into the National Civil Rights Museum for all of America. So it's a very historic place in America, very iconic place. And we managed to get permission to have a protest in front of the Civil Rights Museum, right where Martin Luther King was assassinated. This is, from their perspective, sacred ground, from their perspective. Right? From their perspective, this is of the most iconic places in America. And subhanAllah, I called up, I was one of the speakers and said, look, we're starting at 5:30 p.m. Our Maghrib Salah comes in at 5:29. Can you delay the program by 10 minutes so that we can pray and then join you? Oh, sure, of course. In fact, why don't you pray in front so that people can see you? So subhanAllah, it was such a humbling experience, brothers and sisters. I led Maghrib Salah on microphone in front of thousands of people, right where Martin Luther King was assassinated. The Quran is being recited from their perspective, a sacred place, a hallowed place. We prayed, and all of the people stood silently, symbolically protecting us. Not that the police are going to do anything, but I'm saying symbolically protecting us. SubhanAllah, the amount of... So now what's happening? Across the country, politicians, famous people, actors, they're standing up for truth and justice. Not because they're Muslim. Look at the seerah. Go read the seerah. Abu Talib, Mut'im ibn Adi. Look at Mut'im ibn Adi. So many of the not the Sahaba, they didn't convert. So many of the nobles of Quraysh refused to participate in the evils of the Quraysh. They spoke out in defense of the Muslims, even though they didn't convert. And this is of the most important benefits that we need to see. Who amongst our politicians, who amongst the people in charge are coming out to speak against the atrocities in Syria? And we see such good journalists. There's somebody, I forgot his name, in BBC. He's always saying about the tragedies in Syria. Always highlighting it. We need to support them. We need to show them that we appreciate this. And they become our allies in a cause that we can all agree to. And this is of the most important benefits of this type of tragedy. Of the benefits of this type of tragedy as well is that we also get to see another group of people that is important for us to know. And this group are not our friends and allies. This group are chameleons. You know what a chameleon is? Changes its color according to the circumstances. Of the biggest wisdoms of the Battle of Uhud and the suffering of the Muslims, the loss of the Muslims, because at the end of the day, Uhud was not a military victory. Some have said it was a victory in other ways. Okay, that's fine, but it wasn't a military victory. Uhud was not a military victory. But the benefit that came was more. Why? Allah mentions explicitly in the Quran why. So that you may know one group of people. Which group? Who can tell me? The munafiqun. Allah wanted to show you, He says in the Quran, Allah wanted to show you the reality of the munafiqeen. Because you see, many of the Sahaba, many of them could never believe that Abdullah ibn Ubay and his cohorts would actually turn their backs and walk away at the time of the battle. How could anybody do that? How can you abandon Allah and His Messenger at the time of need of the Messenger? How? So the battle of Uhud, the Muslim eyes were completely wide awake to see who these people are. People whom they thought were allies. And subhanAllah, without getting too explicit, but we see many people in our societies, many institutes and foundations, without getting too explicit, whose agenda is very clear. And these are people we thought good of them before, maybe. These are people, they were amongst us, speaking our language, from our ethnicities, claiming to be of our religion. And yet, when the money comes pouring in, and yet when the opportunities are presented, what do? The whole ummah is thrown under the bus, so that they can rise up. We need to know who these people are. Because it is during these times, and I get to my next point now, it is during these times of trial, during these times of fitna, that leaders are established. How are leaders formed? What does a person do to rise up and become a leader? Leaders demonstrate courage, fortitude, and vision at times of fitna. And this isn't just a Muslim thing. I can quote you the Prophets, I can quote you Khalid ibn al-Walid, I can quote you everyone. It's not just an Islamic thing. Any famous leader, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, any person who is Nelson Mandela. These are people, they don't even believe in Allah as Messenger. They are leaders for their societies, correct? They are role models for large segments of humanity. And even we as Muslims appreciate much of what they have done, even if we disagree with their theology. How did they become leaders? What did Nelson Mandela have to do? Even though when he stood up in front of that court in South Africa, and he said, I am but one person, you can kill me, you cannot kill our spirit. That is what you call leadership. Martin Luther King, thrown into jail for protesting, and he ends up being one of the most venerated figures in American history. And the other figures as well. So the point being, it is during these times where we see who will genuinely be loyal. When it's difficult to be loyal to Allah and His Messenger, who is going to be loyal to Allah and His Messenger? We are seeing this in our time as well. And that's one of the biggest wisdoms as well of these times of difficulty. Of the wisdoms as well of the time of difficulty that are mentioned in the Quran is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us of our own mortalities. That this is not our world. Our world is the akhirah. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, we are all weak. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. We're all weak. Unfortunately, when our needs are provided for, when the money is good and the stomach is full and the house is mashallah big and the car is all fine, what happens? Our hearts become hard. Our hearts become hard. This is the reality. Except for a few whom Allah blesses, that mashallah. But the rest of us, when life is good, we become lazy. We put life on cruise control. You guys know cruise control? Is it an American thing? New cars don't have cruise control, do they? Right? You just go into automatic mode. You just press the automatic button and mashallah things are going. But what happens? A bump in the road. All of a sudden, you have to take your own car into your command. What do I mean by all of this? Fitan and trials, what do? They motivate us for action. They cause us to think, I have a role to play. I have to do something. I cannot just sit back and allow this massacre to occur. I cannot just be inactive when I just found out that 12,000 people were killed in the prisons of this modern day Fir'aun. I cannot just eat my food to my fill and realize that there are people who have fled and are starving 1 country away, 2 countries away at the border. They have no food, no shelter. I cannot put on my thick jacket and not realize that there are mothers out there, there are babies out there that don't even have a shelter over their head. What has just happened? These trials have shaken you from your comfort zone. And that is necessary for our weak hearts. We need that shaking. We need that understanding that, I have a role to play. Allah did not create us for this dunya. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن. Death and life have been created for you to test you. Who does the best deeds? So brothers and sisters, as we see all of these negativities going on, as we see all of these trials and calamities, do not think that it is bad for us collectively. It is good if we extract good out of it. For the Muslim ummah, for every Muslim, our Prophet ﷺ said, there is no such thing as losing a situation. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ خَيْرٌ. Amazing are the affairs of the believer, for everything that happens for his good. If an evil happens, he is patient and Allah rewards. If a good happens, he is thankful and Allah rewards. The point being, no matter what happens is for our good. And I end with one beautiful hadith of our Prophet ﷺ. It is reported in Sahih Muslim from Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As that our Prophet ﷺ said that every single prophet before you was tasked by Allah to warn his ummah of the negatives that will happen and to give them the good tidings of the positive. Meaning, it's my job to tell you some bad news and also to tell you the good news. I have to tell you the bad news. And this ummah of mine, وَإِنَّ أُمَّتَكُمْ هَذِهِ جُعِلَ عَافِيَتُهَا فِي أَوَّلِهَا. The blessed era of our ummah will be the first batch of this ummah. وَسَيُصِيبُ آخِرُهَا بَلَاءٌ وَأُمُورٌ تُنْكِرُونَهَا. It's a very powerful hadith. And later generations will be tested and tried in a manner that might even cause rejection. وَسَيُصِيبُ آخِرُهَا. We are of the akhir of the ummah. Later generations will be tested and tried in manners that almost lead to rejection. And our Prophet ﷺ said, fitan will come one after another. One after another. As if there's no stopping. Wallahi, we thought 5 years ago the situation in Syria was bad. 4 years ago we thought it couldn't get any worse. 3 years ago we thought how could anything, 2 years ago, and just last week we discovered 12,000 people massacred in one prison. Just think about that. More than half the country has fled. Think about that. How can the country be rebuilt when more than half of it is empty? We have not seen this type of tyranny and injustice for our entire last century. Since World Wars 1 and 2, we haven't seen anything like this. So our Prophet ﷺ said, the later ummahs, the later generations, are going to find trials one after another. And he said, every time a trial comes, it will make the previous one seem trivial. SubhanAllah. Every time a trial comes, كُلَّمَا تَجِئُ فِتْنَةٌ تُرَقِّقُ بَعْضُهَا بَعْضًا. Each one will make the previous one look like nothing. Such that when a fitna comes, when a trial comes, the believer is going to say, هَذِهِ مُهْلِكَتِي. This trial will be the end of me. I can't stand it anymore. But ثُمَّ تَنْتَشِفْ. It's going to be lifted up. وَتَجِئُ أُخْرَى. And another trial will come. And the mu'min will say, هَذِهِ. No, this one will cause my death to come. I can't stand this trial. So our Prophet ﷺ said, whoever wishes that death comes to him in a beautiful manner, then let him have iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let him have iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let him worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when death comes, that will be his success. The hadith finishes over there. But the point is, when death comes, that will be his success. Now the hadith, to be brutally honest, seems to be politically depressing. Because it says fitan will come one after the other, and each one will make worse the previous one, and the hadith does not say that they're going to finish. But our Prophet reminded us, what is the end goal? The end goal is when death comes, you die a positive death to enter Jannah. So the Prophet said, whoever wishes to be saved from the fire of hell, فَمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُزَحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ أَنْ يُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةِ. Whoever wishes to be saved from Jahannam and enter Jannah, فَلْتَأْتِهِ مَنِيَّتُهُ. Let death come to him, وَهُوَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And he is firmly believing in Allah and the Day of Judgment, and let him make sure that he does to others what he wants done unto him. Meaning, let not the dhulm of somebody allow you to do dhulm back to them. Let not the killing of one group allow you to unjustly kill another. Let not one injustice lead to another injustice. This hadith tells us that our ultimate goal as we look at these fitan, our ultimate goal is to bring us closer to Allah. Is to remind us that, look, this is a trial, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, insha'Allah ta'ala, bless us in this world or in the next. The fact of the matter, brothers and sisters, it's not about winning this war. Maybe the Palestinian crisis will not be solved in our lifetimes. Maybe the problem of Syria will only get worse in the next 5, 10, 20 years. I don't know. But what I do know, and with this we conclude inshallah, what I do know, Allah is not going to ask me, did you solve the Palestinian crisis? Did you solve the problem of Syria? I can't solve the problem of Syria. But Allah will ask me, and He will ask you, given what I gave you, and the circumstances you have, with your money, and your talents, and your capabilities, what did you do within your qudra to help your brothers and sisters across the world? That is the question I have to be concerned about. And on the Day of Judgment, if I come and I say, oh Allah, I didn't solve the Syrian crisis, but I helped in this manner, and I gave in this manner, and I made dua in that manner, then at least I will have an excuse of having done something in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is what the goal is. Do not get depressed at the situation of the globe. Do not get depressed if you cannot solve the situation. Do what you can according to what Allah has given you in the best of your means and capability. And if you do your best, you have succeeded, even if in the eyes of men you have failed. If you do your best with ikhlas, with taqwa, with sincerity, then on the Day of Judgment you have won, even if politically in this world you have failed. Do you understand my point here? You are not qualified, I am not qualified to solve the global conflicts. But I can't just sit back and do nothing. And Allah is not asking me to do everything in the world. He's asking me to do everything I can do. So what are we doing? That's why we are here today. And I keep on saying one last point, but I have to just mention one other thing, inshallah, and then we are done. A nukta or a benefit comes to mind, brothers and sisters, and that is in the story of Musa alayhi salam. The story of Musa when he fled Egypt, and he was running away. As you all know the story, he was raised in the palace of Fir'aun. He was raised in luxury, and Allah saved him, and etc. etc. Then the altercation happened, and he punched the Egyptian, and Fir'aun and his group wanted to kill him anyway, so they used this as an excuse. So a man came, وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصِ الْمَدِينِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَى. A man from the furthest part came and said, "O Musa, إِنَّ الْمَلَائِكَ يَأْتَمِرُونَ بِكَ, the leaders are gathering to kill you, get out of here." So Musa, فَخَرَجَ مِنْهَا خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبُ. He fled immediately the city. He had no money, he had no food, he couldn't pack his bags. He literally fled the city. Now, what am I saying all of this for? As you all know the story, what happens? He comes to Midian. He comes to Midian, and he doesn't have food, water, money, shelter. He has nothing. And he finds two ladies, as you know, with their flock, and all of the men are hustling and fighting to get water for their flock. And he said, "Why are you outside? Why are you here? مَا خَطْبُكُمَا?" And they said, "We can't go and into the midst of these men until they finish, and by the time they finish there's no water left. But what can we do? We are ladies, our father is elderly, we don't have brothers, we have to do this." What is the point here? Musa has enough problems to worry about himself. He's hungry, he's tired, he's penniless. He can't even give sadaqah because he has nothing to give. But when he finds somebody more impoverished than him, when he finds somebody whom he can help with his sweat, because that's all he can do, he dedicates and donates 10 minutes of his time. Max would have been 10-15 minutes, correct? Take the sheep, go feed them, put them back. And then he goes back and he says, قَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي لِمَا أَنزَلْتَ إِلَيَّ مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَقِيرٌ. Rabb, I'm faqir. I am faqir, I have nothing. I am faqir to anything you can give me. One act of charity. When Musa himself was poor, hungry, lonely, tired, on the run, refugee, one act of charity done from the heart, and he gives to the weakest of the weak, women, without any money, without any power. He gives to the poorest of the poor, despite the fact he's poor. Subhanallah. How does Allah bless him back? Within half an hour, he gets a wife, he gets a house, he gets flock, he gets land to live in. Within half an hour of that act of charity, look, his whole life changed for the better. Correct? Brothers and sisters, we all have our problems, very much smaller than what Musa had. We all have our refugees fleeing away. We all have our problems that we're worried about. Our Syrian refugees, I was going to say, our brothers and sisters in Syria, they need much more than what we can give. But whatever we can give, let us follow in the footsteps of Musa alayhi salam. Whatever little we can give of our sadaqah, insha'Allah ta'ala, Allah will return us back. Our fear will become safety. Our poverty will become richness. Our lack of anything with plentiful of everything. These women, they represent the Syrian refugees for us. They represent the lowest of the low in terms of finances and security and safety. And we are much better off financially than Musa was at that point in time. Surely we can do whatever we can do so that Allah Azza wa Jal will give us even a fraction really of what Allah Azza wa Jal bless Musa infinitely more. But unless we turn to Allah and do whatever little we can, how do we expect Allah's izzah and Allah's blessings to come to us? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide each and every one of us to the truth and to act upon it and to abstain from falsehood and to shun it. وجزاكم الله خيرا, and I will